Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Love Your Journey podcast with Tara Joe and Bailey Boo. And today I'm excited because I have this beautiful guest that I met a couple months ago just through the online world. His name is Chris Mamone. And Chris is an acceptance coach and the founder of the Empowered Grief Journey Coaching Practice and Podcast. He actually helps individuals move from a place of pain into a place of hope and empowerment through their grief. Chris actually helps support those navigating grief, which is how we connected, loss and trauma to rediscover self acceptance and step into their personal power so they can create an inspiring future that's grounded in healing, truth, and purpose. I had the pleasure of meeting Chris, a couple months ago just online and being a guest on his podcast. And there was some magic happens when Chris and I are in the room together and chatting about our experiences in grief, through the loss of my brother and through the loss of your son. So thanks, Chris, for coming on today. It's such a pleasure to see you again and be able to have this conversation, which kind of goes in all directions all the time when we have a chit chat. So I'm excited for you to be here.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Tara. And I was enjoying having you on my podcast because we had a powerful story about Corey, and I got to know a little bit about him. And I love that you guys loved Friends. I love that.
Yes.
Um, and so you're a wonderful person. I don't know what else I can really say because, like you said, when you and I get together, magic happens. And I'm just very grateful to not only have met you, but be on your podcast today.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chris. And I really felt Chris gifted me this opportunity. I don't even know if he knows this, but he gifted me this opportunity to see that I needed to start my own podcast. So that is actually why I'm here. And I believe I think you might be the 31st episode that goes out. So that's a pretty exciting thing. And I would have never had done the hurdle if it hadn't been for me being a guest on your podcast to realize how easy it was. Sometimes we get so stuck on what other people say something is, which, I had one friend tell me how hard it was for her, and I made that my story, which is crazy to me because I tell clients, listen just to yourself and your journey, but we all do it. We all get stuck sometimes on these stories in our heads, and we stop doing the thing that feels the most aligned, which is the most easeful thing. And so here I am, and I'm excited to just have this conversation. So I would love for you to share with us, first of all, what brought you to number one, wanting to be a grief and acceptance coach? What is that story for you? If you would just kind of share with us a little bit.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that story. It's a long story, but I put it in podcast form. Is what I like to share with people. My
Sure.
I did a psychic reading 3 weeks ago with another guest that was on my podcast, and what I thought was funny because I didn't tell him anything is he said, "Grief chose you, and you chose grief." And so I looked
Mm.
back and I said, you're absolutely right about that. And so my story has been a lot of grief over the last 35 years I've been on the planet. Long story short, I've lost a lot of jobs. I've lost people that have meant a lot to me, particularly in the last 5 years. I watched my grandfather take his last breath from terminal cancer. And that was my first real experience with watching somebody pass on. And that was very brutal for me in that moment. It was very hard to conceptualize what just happened, and grief can make you feel hopeless a lot when you experience something like that. I went into depression after that for a little bit, and then I thought life was going to go back on the way it should, and then unfortunately, 3 months before my son passed, I lost that job, and then lost my son. Like I said, 3 months after that, and that's the loss that really rocked my world. That's the one that I'll just say I died that day. I really did. Um, I
Yeah.
I was just writing a post about that in a group I'm in for lost parents, and I said, that day was the biggest impact of grief I've ever had. And so, going through the last it's almost 3 years in September. I got to a place where that pain was so unbearable and it was so heavy, and I said, this can either be a gift or it can be a curse in my life, and I'm choosing to make a gift out of it. So if somebody was to ask me if I was going to be a grief coach 5 years ago, I would have looked at you and said, I don't even know, I wouldn't do this. But today, after what's happened to me and my experiences, grief has chosen me and I've chosen it. So, very grateful to my son. I wouldn't be here today without him.
Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit deeper about what that was like for you? If you feel comfortable, just however you feel safe to share that in terms of my audience is really used to me sharing, real truths with them. And
Mhm.
sometimes I feel there is a lot of parents that have felt the same as you and often feel really lost or not heard because people don't understand what it's like to lose a child, even as young as your son. So, if you wouldn't mind sharing kind of what that felt like for you and maybe something that you would share with your clients to help them through that. If there is a parent that is in that journey right now, maybe what you've learned from that.
So I'll share with you guys my story a little bit more in detail, and I'll share the advice I would give a parent if they lost a child. Um, when that all happened very quickly when we lost Caden. We lost him the day before he was supposed to be born, and what happened was he had stopped moving in the afternoon, and we rushed to the emergency room that later that night after meeting with the midwife, and his heart had stopped. And what I'll share
Mm.
is, um, talk about a big shock is what I'll say. It's something that
Yeah,
it would be like getting hit out of the blue by something right across your face, just you didn't even see it coming, and it's something that hits you very, very deep, and that's why I said, that day that he passed, I felt like I died. I felt absolutely
mm,
numb. I felt scared. I felt panicked beyond comprehension. It was like a massive panic attack on top of shock, and on top of feeling helpless because you can't do anything. And that's the hard part for me is I like to be able to do something when those things happen.
yeah,
And there's nothing I could do. And then, on top of that, as a lost father, and I'll say this for women that listen to this, it is very, very hard being a husband, especially if you have a spouse, by the way, who's very, very present, very, very involved. It is not just hard that we just lost a child. That one really hurts. The other one is that I had to watch my wife go through that process of hearing that our son passed, and she was in a very, very big place of shock and disbelief and pain. And
yeah,
it was insurmountable. I can't really go into much more detail of that because I will
yeah,
lose my whatever here, but I'll just say
yeah.
that
That's okay.
um, it was a very hard place for me because I felt helpless. And it
Yeah.
was the fact that I couldn't save my son. And it was also that there was nothing I could say or do that was going to help my wife feel better in that moment. And I know some people might say that's a little off or whatever, but I'll be truthful. There's nothing I could have done in that moment that was going to make it better. So what I'll share
Yeah.
about
Well,
that.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like I could really feel like you already answered my question because I could already feel this energy coming through of like, what was that like for your wife? And you observing from your own grief and like, you know what I mean? In partnership, often we go through griefs all the time. Like you lost a job as an example, let's say. So your wife would be there as you lost the job, but it's not this like it's a very different scenario, I think, because you guys are both experiencing something so raw and so very not everybody gets to um yeah not it's a very what's the word I'm looking for, it's just such a sensitive topic of conversation, I think, because there's so many expectations that were just lost in a moment, right? So
Yeah.
many uh future desires just in an instant. And I think it like for me, it feels like you both went through this ripple effect of grief that was compounded actually. And just how many times I imagine you, well, this could have been the day that I took my son, or this could have been, you know what I mean? Like I'm sure all of those stories, I know with Corey's grief, it's like the birthday comes up, there's that thing and all the things that we used to do together, but you hadn't even had that chance to experience that. So that must have been really hard.
It was, I share with people that I don't ever pray you go through losing a stillborn because
Yeah.
it's the hardest thing I've ever had to go through, and I will say the pain does not go away. It's always there. Um,
Yeah.
you're constantly you're constantly triggered and reminded every day. You go out in public,
Yes.
every single day, you're reminded of if my kid was here. You're reminded of that every day. It sucks.
Yeah.
But I'll
Oh,
share that I want to share the beautiful thing about Caden, by the way. Um,
yeah.
the nurse that was there that night that told us that his heart stopped, I bless this woman because I feel like the nurses that were there the day we delivered him, I truly feel like they were angels from God. I really do, because I could not have asked for more supportive, kind, loving, compassionate, empathetic women that were there for my wife and I. And the nurse that told us his heart stopped, she actually came after we delivered him. I think like an hour after my wife gave birth to him, she came to our room. And I don't even know how she found us. I don't even we there was no talk because she was an ER nurse. But Chandler, I've never forgotten her. She came in to give us condolences of everything. But that night, the hospital closed their food service down when we gave birth to him, and we didn't even know about food. And honestly, it wasn't even something thinking about. But she went down and got us food in the kitchen somehow. I don't even know how, but
Aw.
she took care of that for us. This cutesy little nurse, Jessica, I've never forgotten her either because it was such a tense moment of very sad, very somber, but also just so grateful to meet this little baby that you made. And I'll never forget her saying in this moment where it's very somber, she said, I don't want to be the strange person right now, but your son has the cutest freaking nose. And it just broke the tension in the room. Um, and she really made it a very heartfelt situation for both of us. And so, um, I'm saying all this to say that in the midst of the most brutal moment of life, there was so much beauty to be had, and there was something that I experienced too, more on a spiritual side of things. I was going through a lot of pain in that moment. I felt like, if you want to call it spirit or God, wherever your belief sits, but I felt like somebody put up a wall around my wife and I and Caden, and it felt like nothing outside that veil mattered. It didn't even exist at that point. And there was only me,
Yeah.
my wife, and him. And for some reason, my wife said, you never cried when you held him. And I said I couldn't bring myself to cry because he was so beautiful. He was such a
Oh,
I saw myself in this child and I saw who I
yeah.
needed to step into. And I was so enthralled by him that I almost couldn't even be mad in that moment. It was just so beautiful.
Thank you for sharing that. And that moment that you're describing, the veil around you, the protective layer of nothing else exists other than this moment, that present moment, I experienced that with Corey. You just described it so perfectly, like you really did. And oh, there was something so angelic, protective, um, such a surrendering moment that is to be there. And it's also life changing because when you go through that moment where your life changes instantly, it's like you have this quantum leap timeline shift that is so rapid that all the bullshit in your head that you like to say to yourself every single day to stop you from being who you should be or your truest self or living the life you desire or whatever that thing is, it just ends right there in that moment and you step into something else. It's actually, and honestly, Chris, I don't think everybody does that. That's what I get. I think there's only so many people that actually take that as a gift for themselves and understand that that's the most significant healing moment we could do for ourselves is to accept the surrendering of just being really present in that moment for our families and also understand that there's so much beauty that is being gifted to us, even if we can't see it yet in that moment, and to allow that to just shed the bullshit that we've held on to for so long and step into actually what life is supposed to be like, you
That
know?
was beautifully said, Tara. Beautifully said. And that's what I'll share, by the way, that I would tell a lost parent today if you lose a stillborn. You're in for some very rough times for the first year. It is going to be really, really hard for you to even remotely, I hate using the word, but go back to normal. Oh God, that is rough. I will tell you
Yeah,
that.
totally. Yeah.
The words that people are going to say to you, by the way, you are going to be so sensitive and volatile with things people say. And I want you to know, by the way, if you ever react poorly to that or you take major offense to it, there is nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You do not need to be fixed. There's not an issue with you. You're dealing with a very high amount of grief. And I can share
Yeah.
that the best thing you can do for yourself is to hold compassion for yourself. You just lost the one thing you can never get back. And that's what people don't understand about my journey in particular. I don't get a redo with Caden. I don't get a second
Yeah.
chance. I don't get to
No.
relive that. I don't get those things. So
Yeah.
I want you to know as a lost parent, if you're going through that, please, please be kind to yourself. Please. You are about to go through some, pardon my French, some serious major emotional shit. And it's going to feel heavy. It's going to be very hard. You're going to have people, by the way, that I'm going to recommend to you to stay away from because they're going to be not safe people. That does not mean they're bad people, by the way, but they're not safe people for you to be around as you grieve. And I'm going to encourage you to be around people who are supportive for you, that hold space for you, and just let you talk. And that's what I do on my podcast, by the way, is I don't talk much. I let people talk. I let them say what they need to say because that's healing. When they can have a space like that, that's healing. So that's what I
Yeah,
wanted to share
you
for.
know, I think I mentioned that to you one time. I said to you, you just have this grand ability to have let somebody be witnessed in their story. And there's no other better gift than you can give somebody than to let them be heard, sometimes for the very first time in the way that they're meant to be heard. That is a gift anybody can give, but Chris has this magic ability. And actually, one of my friends that I met when I moved to Calgary in my 20s, he just lost his son, and I'm just thinking about him. He's popping up in my mind right now, that I think I will share this episode with him and your contact information, because it's such a hard experience to lose a child. I don't even understand what that is because I've never had kids. And so I can't even relate to, I could sit here and understand the grief in terms of similarities, but I will never
Mhm.
be in your shoes. Even if I met another person who lost their child, I have a friend that lost their child when he was 11 too. And I will never understand that either. And neither would you, even though both lost children. There's similarities, but everybody goes through their journey differently, right? And we all experience it different. And I say that it's never a wrong way. There's never a wrong way to grieve, really. It's just letting ourselves navigate life and being just really open to the emotions. I've shared this a lot on my podcast about how I'm normalizing. Like, I cry a lot when I'm on with guests. I can't help it. It's just who I am. I can't. As I was listening at the beginning, I was like, "Whew, it's gonna be hard." And it's not even me. Not at that point. We're not even talking about my brother. We're talking about your son, because I could feel that. I just have such empathy, and I just could feel how raw that must have been for both of you to experience that. And so, but I normalize that. Like, I want this to be okay, to be in a situation where you're walking down the grocery store and you're tearing up, and it's okay as you're thinking about your son, right? Or
Yeah.
I wanted to actually ask you, did you say the nurse's name was Chandler?
Yes.
Like as in friends?
Yeah. No, I'm not joking. Her name is Chandler. Spelled the same
Okay,
way as
so
Chandler and Friends.
so crazy because, well, I've said this to Chris again and again. I feel like his son and my brother have gotten us together for these conversations. Like, because every single time we get on a call, and we've only pressed record twice, twice, this one and the one with you. Everybody else is missing the other conversations we've had, but there's always a weaving, isn't there? Always a
There
weaving.
always
It's
is.
so awesome. I just love it. I mean,
Well,
Corey
the day
loves
after I talked
Friends.
to you last, I went to my family's house for dinner or something, and I got out of my car and I forgot something, so I went back to the car. And there's a single black crow right by my car, and we were talking about that right when we got off our Zoom call, and I was like, I
Yes.
don't know what it is, Tara, if that's Corey saying something or Caden saying, I don't even know, but I was like, that doesn't happen on random. I'll say that.
Well, I'll kind of give the listeners a little bit of what that's about because when I went home to Saskatchewan, which was the first time that I went back to to the place that I helped take care of Corey where I was raised, all those things, the one things that would the animal wisdom always comes through, by the way, for me. That's sort of the magic that shows up for me because I used to do animal communication, but the black crow followed my dog and I everywhere around my mom's house. And I said to mom, have you noticed the black crow around your because I've never all the 20 some years she's lived there. And she said no. And I thought, oh, that's so interesting. And even at one point, there would be two crows. One would sit here on one tree, and then the other side of the pathway would be the other crow. It was wild. And then that also happened at my dad's farm. There were so many blackbirds there and crows. It was probably the most I've ever seen, and I could really feel their power and wisdom for me in that around Corey energy. And that was probably the hardest visit home I've ever had to do. The hardest visit because I did not want to go back, first of all, because I knew all the things were waiting for me. Like,
Mm.
some of the this is what I said to my family is during the time of Corey's loss, I had already gave notice to my landlord to move out of Calgary because I was going to move to Saskatoon to take care of Corey full time. And so after he passed away in the celebration of life, I couldn't stay to help close down our house for him and help the grieving process for myself. I had to leave and go pack my house. So I couldn't finish and close the doors like with my family, with my sister especially, and my brother-in-law who helped us do that for Corey. That was really hard for me. And so this was my chance to do that. I could, I went through boxes of Corey's t-shirts. He always wore these t-shirts that were, movies, Jurassic Park. Like probably has 25 t-shirts of Jurassic Park and X-Files and things like this. And so that I opened that box. I was with my dad. I opened that box and I just like tears, right? Like it just hit me. And I said to dad, oh, I don't think I'm ready for it. I don't think I'm ready for this yet. Let's just close that box. Um, but I went back and I stole a couple t-shirts to take back with me. But it's wild. And then when we recorded that, I don't know, do you want to share what your goal is? Are you able to, or is the secret that you and I are working together doing something in the future? Is that a secret or are we able
You know,
to tell
I got 2 more meetings to go with people tomorrow, and then this thing's happening. It's a
us?
real deal. I'm
Well,
happy
do you
to
want to
share
share?
that since you brought that up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
So so I started my podcast in end of February, February 27th. Recorded episode 62 last week. And long story short, I kept saying to myself in the back of my head, and for your listeners, I'll just let them know I'm a very spiritual intuitive for some reason. I hear messages often when I do things. And anyway, the podcast started going down this road of there's something bigger than this that's meant to happen. And it's not really about you, it's about other people. And you'll discover that as you do more podcasts. And so, long story short, I decided to write an anthology book because I wanted to find a way to honor Caden. And I kept trying to write the book, which I plan to for him, but it's just so damn hard because I get very emotional when I try to write that. And so then I thought, this would be a lot easier if I did this with people. And so I went through my podcast episodes and I looked for the people I really connected with that I stayed connected with after the episode. We collaborate on things. And long
Yeah.
story short, I found 22 people, including yourself. And
Yeah.
long story short, we're going to be writing an anthology book called The Empower Grief Collective. And it's 23 stories of grief that carved a new path forward for people. And my big mission I found out, which is a lot bigger than me and a lot bigger than us, by the way, which is why it's really cool that we're doing this, is to change how the world sees and experiences grief. And so through this
Mm,
anthology book, my I was talking to my medium that was on my podcast. She did a reading for me last week, and I talked to her yesterday because she's going to be in the book. And when I told her I had this ambitious goal to sell 100,000 copies of this book when it gets done, just because I want to change the world on a big scale, she said, just so you know, Caden just came through while you were talking. He said, add a zero, Dad. And so,
well, that's what I did mine too. I was like, oh, Chris, think bigger.
so
Bigger, Chris,
I,
come on.
I was laughing because I was like, Becky, that does sound like something my son would say after what I heard for
Yeah.
the medium reading. So I said, okay, well, instead of 100,000, let's make it 1 million. I said, let's go out there and impact the world because grief isn't spoken about. People have this idea of let go, move on, get over it. And I have found, by the way, on 62 episodes, there's not a single person that's been on my show that has ever done that with their loss. Not a single one. And
Yeah.
so I know out there that's the truth, but we got to get the truth out there through the book. So I'm really excited to do this book with you, Tara. And to share Corey's story too, by the way, because when you were on my podcast, I mean, I could just like feel Corey's energy and the fact that he loves Jurassic Park. I love that. Friends, X-Files too. I got into that a little while ago.
But you just said the X-File phrase. Did you know that?
No, what was that?
Right. I wrote it down because I was like, oh, we're going back to that. You just said, I want to get the truth out there. And
Oh,
that's the poster. So come on. It's
yes.
just, I mean, really. I mean, Chris, honestly, and people who
Love
know me
that.
really well, I don't say this lightly when I say the day that I met Chris, I knew there was something really big happening for you. Like really, really big. When I sat on that podcast with Chris, I was like, whoa, this is magic. There's something you could just feel it. You could just feel the power of, I don't even know if we know what this is yet, but I know I'm going to be a part of it. I have felt there's an angel feather coming down right now, right in front of me. Oh,
I saw
interesting.
something go by my eye as you were talking. I don't know
Yeah.
what it
So
was, but
there's just and I've talked about this too, when you had I posted when I was in Banff on my way out to Kelowna to do a house sit. You had posted, where is that place? I said, that is, Banff, Alberta. It's a national park. It's so beautiful. And I said, wouldn't it be cool if we did a retreat somewhere in the mountains, like a grief retreat of some sort? But just the idea of talking about these things that at the same time it's something so awful that we both went through, there is something so lit up about it at the same time. Do you know what I mean by that? Like it just lights me up to, yes, we went through tears talking about the story, but there's something bigger here because I'm all about normalizing feelings. Number one, I'm all about that. So people will see that I cry and I can't stop it. It's just what it'll be, and it'll always be that way. And I just want people to know that don't let anybody tell you to grieve a certain way. It's the worst thing that somebody could say to somebody else is get over it. Aren't you done
Mhm.
that yet? You know? And actually I heard Corey say, my brother, whenever I would cry, he's like, are you done yet?
Uh,
Are you done that yet, Tara? Like, can we go out and play or
I feel
whatever,
like the
like
amount you
he's
told me about Corey on your podcast episode, like I get it when you make comments like that. I totally get. I can like feel how you would say that after what you
I
told me about
know.
him.
He's so funny. Like my brother had such a wild sense of humor and so loving at the same time, right? So when I think about grief and the way that I've really seen the magic of it, which is to feel it all, let yourself feel it. And I would like to ask you how you help your clients with that as well. Because it's like, if you allow yourself to really feel it and come out the other side and really be open to seeing the magic it has to offer you, that is that is where life is. That part, right? And you can tap into that in those experiences and let yourself feel it. And we've talked about this too, because you said to me on that call, like, as a male, you weren't told to feel,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Us women do it all the time, and it was, it's okay, but we also get the bad flavor of that too, which is, oh, she's so emotional or crazy or all the things that I just get
I'm
so
trying
upset
to
about.
I'm trying to break that, and I've been saying this in every podcast for the last month or so. I've said, you guys have heard it too, people listening. You've always heard the phrase, well, women are too emotional. They're overly emotional.
Yeah.
No, they're not. They know how to feel emotion. They've learned how to feel emotion. They've learned how to express emotion. The thing that men are really good at is either suck it up or be angry. We know how to do those two things really well, but the giant chasm in the middle here is called emotions. And anytime you bring that up around men, for the most part, they're like, whoa, this thing's scary. Like, what is this? And so I've been trying to help people understand. One of my biggest lessons I learned with Caden, by the way, one of the biggest gifts he ever gave me. I was making a boxes for his ashes about a month after he passed. I was a woodworker. And I got pissed off at the wood and I threw it on the basement floor and I thought I'd step on it. I don't know what was going through my brain at that point when I was angry, but I crushed my foot. I ended up in a boot for 6 weeks. Um,
No.
as I crawled up my basement
Mhm.
stairs on my hands and knees because I couldn't walk, I was sitting there cussing and pissed off, angry, crying. And then I broke down about 20 minutes later and I just said, I'm really upset that he's not here. I'm upset that that was taken away from me. I'm upset about where this new thing of life's going because I'm scared shitless right now.
Yeah.
And when I got real with myself, by the way, and felt that emotion, what I learned, by the way, anger was something else. It wasn't anger. Anger was actually love for Caden. That's what comes out. And
Mm.
so, the thing I'll share that not a lot of people know about my story in particular is my son was born on the 23rd of September. For an entire year after he passed, every 23rd of the month, like clockwork, and I didn't think about this at all, it would just happen. I would wake up on the 23rd in a foul mood. I was just pissed that day. I don't know what was in me, but I just was very angry and I was just like, leave me alone. Don't go
Mm.
near me. Don't talk to me. I don't want to listen to that.
Yeah.
And I had to sit there every time that happened. I had to say, hey, you miss your son today. You miss him a lot. I had to sit there and say that to myself constant to get that anger out. And so what I try to share about this is that emotions are messages. They're not something to be controlled. And we need to get rid of this ideology that women are overly emotional and men don't feel. Those are outdated ideologies. We are emotional beings. We have messages within us. Some of my clients that come to me having a really bad day for whatever reason, they're grieving really hard, and I see it all over the place. And the biggest thing I ask them is say, how are you feeling today? Or what emotion are you feeling? And if they say things like I'm angry or I'm pissed or I'm upset, I say, what's causing you to feel that way right now? What's driving that emotion? And they'll say, well, I have this, this, and this going on, or I really miss the person I lost. And they go into a story about it. And I get them to see it and I say, hey, do you see how you're not actually angry, by the way? You're not. You're feeling other emotions. You're just covering it up. And I drive people there because I want them to feel who they are. Anger is just a big cover blanket, if you will, for how we really feel. And I like
Mhm.
to get people in that place to actually feel themselves for once and cut out the bullshit of the
Yeah.
world, what people are telling them to believe. I want them to step in themselves for once without all those filters on and just say, this is who I am. This is how I feel. This is what I'm experiencing. And something very powerful happens in that moment for everybody that I walk that process through. It's a beautiful thing to witness.
Well, what's popping into my mind too is, like, for me, what I say to my clients is anger is a catalyst for change. So if we are feeling angry, we don't have to stay there. We can go, oh, I'm angry. Great. What do I need to change here? It drives us to do things. So, like, for me, when I was fighting for Corey's rights and really advocating for his care and advocating for what is right, what should be okay, right? I am fueled by anger in that moment because it's pushing me to be driving me to do the thing that is right. But if I stay in that the whole time, that's where it becomes unhealthy, right? It's allowing ourselves to be able to navigate those emotions and do good with them as well as process it, right? So they're like a lot, I was just thinking about this with the emotion part that we were talking about is if we normalize this concept of feeling emotions and understanding that each one gifts us power, then we want to feel them all. Because if
Mhm.
we're just enraged or we're just sad, we're missing out on this magical opportunity of all of these other experiences we could be having by navigating the grief, by navigating, joy. Because we can have one and the other. We don't have to have joy or grief or joy or sadness. It can be all together. And I think it's been so foreign for us. We've been programmed to think it has to be one or the other for so long. Um, it's like normalizing that feeling of discovering that it is okay to have it all, to experience everything at once. What's your thoughts on that, Chris?
So, what I like to share with people is grief is a personal transformation journey. And I only found that
Mm,
out after going through the losses I went through. Um,
mm,
you're never going to be the same person that you were before that loss as you're going to be afterwards. And this is
yeah,
something that society has very wrong is this whole idea of going back to normal. Inside me, I want to laugh sometimes. I'm very respectful, but inside I laugh because I go, you're never going to be the same person. And I
no,
sometimes it's not appropriate to tell people that sometimes, but when they're in the right place is when I'll share it with them when they're ready to hear that message. But what I'll share in my own personal story, I'm not the same person I was before I lost my son, not even close. That person died that day. I lost my
yeah,
grandfather. I'm not the person I was before that loss. Doesn't happen. Now, what you want to know about grief, by the way, is you're walking away from who you were and stepping into who you're becoming. And what reason this
mm,
is so scary is because this thing over here is a lot like when we go to a new restaurant. We're like, is the food going to be okay? Is the service going to be all right? And there's going to have something I might want to eat. We're doing that same process when we go through grief. We're going, oh, I have to let go of that part of myself. I'm used to that. It's comfortable over there. I'm okay with that. Oh, this is
mm,
scary and hard for me and new, and I'm not used to this. And we're in that tug of war place when we're going through grief. And that's why I always tell people be empathetic to yourself, be compassionate. This is not going to be you wake up one day and all of a sudden you're way over here and you're good to go. It doesn't work like that. And especially when you lose a
mm,
child, by the way, I'll just tell you who you're becoming is a long process and it's not linear. And that's why I tell people
no,
grief is a very messy journey. It's a very messy place. It's okay to be all over the map. It's okay to be very angry and upset one day. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. If you're like Tara and you cry a lot and you're upset, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with it. You're actually feeling yourself for once. You're listening to yourself. And that's what I care about the most is because so many people walk around every day with a mask on, trying to manage other people's emotions or try not to offend and upset people while they're grieving or making people uncomfortable. One thing you reminded me of, Tara, and this is kind of one of these blessing and curse moments I get as a lost parent, is I went into a store one day and I was walking down some aisle and there was a little kid, not more than probably five, maybe 5, 6 years old, if that. And he was playing imaginary pirates or military man, something. I don't know.
yeah,
But he like fell on the ground like a combat roll and kicked me and ran into me or whatever. And I didn't think anything of it because I was in the throes of my grief. And I just said,
yeah,
"Hey, you're all good." He saw that he hit me and he got nervous. And I said, "Hey, you're fine. Don't worry about it. It's all good. Nobody died. Like we're good."
yeah,
His mom got really offended by it and was like, "Get off the ground. Pick up yourself. Like you can't run and hit people." In the back of my head as a lost
mm,
parent, I was sitting there going, you don't know that my son died. You don't know what it's like to lose a child. You have a child right now, and I wish I could have what just happened that you're upset about.
mm,
And
yeah,
so I have that conflict all the time when I go out in public because I have experiences like that and what others
yeah,
see as problems I don't see because those are the problems by the way I wish I had. And so
Mm,
that's a powerful perspective that I wanted to share on your podcast today because as you go through
yeah,
grief, this doesn't always have to be about lost parents, by the way. It can be any grief. You will have that same
yeah.
thing in your own context. And I love for people who have that moment, like I just described, to sit with it and just process that for a minute because you will find the gratitude in those moments. You'll find the empathy in them. You will. And you'll be
Mm,
sitting there on the other side of the fence, like I am, saying, be grateful you have what you have. Be grateful for that moment because I will never have that. And so
yeah,
you can help people see a big shift in perspective with those moments.
yeah. Well, I think gratitude's a huge conversation to be had with any sort of healing journey that you're on. I think if you can get to a place of gratitude every single day, it can really help you. It's a humbling experience to go through these experiences, right? When we're grief, when we go through anything, any loss of any sort, right? So, yeah, gratitude practice. What is something that you would suggest if somebody wanted to feel a little bit more grateful in their life? What would it feel like for you? What advice would you give basically for your gratitude journey?
I tell people to start very small with that one. And that small gratitude can be, having your cup of coffee that you do every morning. It can be that simple. For some
Yeah.
people, by the way, who have gone through or in the serious throes of grief, just getting out of bed every morning and setting foot outside your front door, that's a win. I don't care what
Yeah.
way you want to look at that. That's a
Yeah.
win and being grateful for
Yeah.
that. I think what's hard for gratitude, by the way, and I just had a very powerful coaching session with somebody on Thursday last week about this.
Yeah.
They reached out to me because of something I wrote online, and they said, Chris, I don't understand how you can have gone through grief and you're a grief coach and whatnot. And you always tell people that life happens for you, not to you. I don't understand that. I can't make sense of it because I lost somebody in my life to a car crash. I can't make sense of how the hell would that happen for me. And I said,
Mm,
I'm happy to share that, by the way, because this is coming back to gratitude. And this is a very, very hard thing to do, by the way, that does take time. But I wanted to share this because this is how powerful this is. If you walk around, by the way, and say, I'll use myself for example so you guys can see it in reality. But if I say that Caden died and that happened to me, I put myself in a victim mentality. And now it's really easy for me, by the way, to blame everything outside of myself for why that happened. I can say, somebody dropped the ball with the doctor side of things. I can say, um, for whatever reason, XYZ happened. I can always start blaming and victimizing that situation. But that will only bring me, by the way, negative emotions and negative feeling, harboring bad thoughts about it. It won't let me get out of grief. It'll actually keep me stuck in it. And so when you start to say to yourself as you go through grief that this is happening for me, what you're really doing in that moment is accepting. And that's why I call myself an acceptance coach. That's the first step in the process of actually healing yourself. I had to accept that my son was gone. He was no longer going to be with the physical world. And I will tell you that did not happen overnight. It took me a very long time to even mutter those words. It took me a long time. But when you get to that place of acceptance, you can then say, this was my experience, but I'm not defined by my experience, but I experienced this moment. And what did this
mm,
moment give me? And I always come back to there's gifts, there's lessons and blessings in all these moments if you look for them. Even in the worst of your pain, they're always there. And so back to gratitude. When you're looking for gifts, lessons, and blessings, you're living in gratitude every day. Something that I did, oh, my necklace fell off. Caden, I got a necklace made by a small family in Idaho after he passed, and I have a poem on it
mm,
that I can't read because I lose it every time I read it, but it's got his name and the tree of life on it, and it's meant for me to be grateful for the experience he gave me. What he really did for me, by the way, to share with you the gratitude side of things, he took away a lot of pain in my life. I'll say that as much as he that hurt him passing, I had people leave my life that were no longer meant to be in my journey. I got out of career fields that I did not belong in, that were not aligned with me.
mm,
My wife and I got closer together losing him. We
mm,
started setting boundaries in our life to protect ourselves from negativity and controlling and narcissistic people that were around us. We changed our entire life and our values and what we stood for and what we wanted to create. And so what I say is that these things happen for us, they don't happen to us. And when we live in that for us mentality, gratitude is always there. And so I can share with you guys, if I had not lost my son, I would never have met Tara. I would not have a podcast today. I would not be writing an anthology with 22 beautiful people across the world in 4 different countries. The Empower Grief Journey wouldn't be. And so
Yeah.
I can only have nothing but gratitude and appreciation for my son. I can have only those. The negative things are always there. The sad, hard feelings of grief, they're always there. I can go visit him anytime I want. But there's so much power in being grateful for what happened. And there's so much power in saying, this happened for me. And so, how can I use my grief to propel me forward in life? Because grief is not about letting go. It's not about forgetting. It's not about moving on. It's not about those things. It's there to push you forward in life, it's there to be with
Mm.
you. And so,
Yeah.
that's why I love that you talk about Corey a lot. I love that about you. I love that Corey's still with you. He never left. He's in different form, but you celebrate him every day by talking about him, keeping his memory alive. That's living in the for you mentality. That's living in the gratitude of his
Yeah.
life. So it's a beautiful thing.
Well, and it's an interesting blend. So thank you for that because it's an interesting, place to be because we were navigating so much trauma and prior to Corey's death, right, for like a good 2 years probably in total. And it's one thing if we had just lost Corey through illness, but we were dealt a hand that was so shitty that you know his story will come out. That whole experience I will share on the podcast one day. um and for me, I'm still navigating the piece of, and still some family members are still navigating that piece around, like Corey was stuck in the hospital for 10 months. He didn't need to be. And because of that 10-month visit, his brain deteriorated even further because it's a hospital, first of all. Um, we were struggling with him finding proper housing, like a group home. No group homes wanted him. And I mean, I could go on and on about this, but there's this piece that still feels so triggering for us as a family. And each individual family member has their own lens of like triggering experience of that. But definitely in most of ours, that 10-month visit is the highest anger point for us and hard to move through. I know I had to do some EMDR around it, um, which is helpful. So EMDR is a form of uh, what would you call it? What is it called? Have you had EMDR before? I don't want to
I
like,
haven't had it before, but I think
yeah,
it's like eye
eye
movement.
rapid something something. Anyways, usually a
Yeah.
therapist, counselor, somebody has to be qualified to do it, and it helps you take the trigger point off the trauma. And I would love from your standpoint because for me, I want to share the story, not because I'm pissed off about it. That's not where I'm going to come from when I get to the place. I want to do it because more people should know that this is actually reality of what happens to individuals with disabilities. That's at the end of the day why I want to share the story, because if people are quiet about those kind of things, it remains quiet and it remains something that nobody wants to talk about. And that's not what my brother's story was. That's definitely not who he was. He was not the quiet one. I mean, he had his moments, but he was in the room, people knew, right? And I know that him and his friends deserved way more better treatment. and funding and all of the things. And so I don't want to be quiet about it. Like, oh, well, he's gone, so we should just hush up. That's actually the opposite of what's driving me. The opposite is like, sorry, like I'm gonna say it all, and I don't have to filter myself now because it's my own podcast. So no news channel gets to like delete and clear and not get the facts straight or whatever the bullshit is. No advocacy group can shut me down because they can't because they're getting funded by the government. Like it has to come out. It
Hmm.
has to come out because otherwise the world doesn't change if we don't share our experiences. But I want to do it from a lens of not being so rageful about it. So, and I'm not the only family member. So the reason I'm asking you this is just as input. So if anybody else is listening to what they've gone through with grief, where you can get so rageful about the experience because it can't. I mean, I know you were talking to me that you've done podcast episodes with individuals that were murdered. There's so much rage in that, right? Like there's so much stuff that goes on and so much injustice in the world. So how do you get to a place of that, to a place of not feeling so triggered with it and seeing the blessing in that? What would your advice be?
Well, Tara, you asked a very powerful question, and it's something I still work on myself. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna share a couple things that are they're not quick fixes. By the way, I have to preface out they are not quick fixes for this. But when we go through a loss like that, like what you went through with Corey, like I went through with Caden, the bit of advice I'm gonna share right now was very, very hard to me when I heard it in the throes of grief. It took me many months to find peace with this, but that was their experience. That was Caden's experience. That was Corey's experience. It wasn't Tara's. It wasn't Chris's. It wasn't your experience. You had an experience of being there to witness it and be part of it, but it was not your experience. And what people have a hard time doing, and I'm guilty of this myself, and I struggle with it too, is we're taking on somebody else's experience as our own. And what we're doing is identifying ourselves through that. And this is where, by the way, we get very, very triggered and very, very angry. And I want you guys to know, by the way, that is normal. I'm not saying this to be disrespectful. This is normal. What I try to encourage, by the way, is separate yourself a little bit from that and say, that was Caden's experience. His passing was his alone, it was his journey. I got to witness it and be part of it, but it was not my journey. My journey was just there to be a witness of it. And so when you separate that out, by the way, what you're doing effectively is making your experience and letting that situation be what it is, not what you think it is. And that gives you some separation from it so that when you do get triggered, by the way, you can identify what that trigger is and what those emotions are coming up. Because um, triggers are, as I've come to find, I shared this in the grief conference I presented at. Triggers are our best teachers, believe it or not. And I have a hard time saying that, by the way, because I get triggered constantly. But triggers are our best teacher. They're there to say that there's a part of us that is unhealed, that needs attention. It needs to be seen or heard or understood to be learned so that that trigger can be quiet. And I don't like the idea that triggers go away. I don't like saying that because it's very dismissive. It's what I found in the grief community. So what I like to say is triggers can be very loud, but our goal is to make them quiet so that we can overtake them, if that makes sense.
Mm, yeah.
So if we like
Like
if
not
I
so
go
in your
out,
face, right? Like it's not like it's in your face right now, but it's at a distance. Like I find when I have a trigger come up and I can deal the emotion in different various ways, modalities I do, but it just takes the intensity off of it, right? So I can look at it
yeah,
almost like from afar where it's like, oh, I see that thing now and I see it now from a different lens because there's not the intensity of that emotion like in my body, almost like it's like right here. That's the difference of it is. It gives it some distance.
yeah, it's the thing. I'll share a really quick exercise for people that can help with this because I found it very powerful for me. I did an NLP session with someone once. I'm paraphrasing the timeline therapy that works with that. But if you find yourself being very triggered in the moment, or if you go home after something like that happened, what I recommend doing is sitting in a quiet space, something without noise and distractions, or plug your ears with something and close your eyes. And what I want you to do is think about this situation from three different angles. I want you to think about that situation from your perspective, what you see, what you feel, what you think. I want you to flip to the other side, the person that was involved with that interaction. What were they seeing? What were they thinking? What were they observing? And then I want you to look from the top down as if you were 20 feet over the room, looking at you and this other person interacting and engaging in this triggered moment. Be the observer of this. And when you're in the observer position, there's no emotion, there's no belief, there's no trigger, there's none of those things exist. The observer is just there to see what's going on and interpret what they see. And it comes in the context of I see this, it looks like, it feels like, it sounds like. Notice how I'm not using words I am or it is. I'm just saying it looks like, it sounds like. What we're trying to do is lessen the intensity with that. And when you can do that, by the way, your emotions that might come out in anger is actually going to be love. It might be frustration with something, or it might be, I was really disappointed that this was the outcome for whatever reason. It lessens that intensity down so that you can process it and understand it better. And as far as triggers go, sometimes it's like a loud dog right here in your ear, just barking full volume, 110 decibels, just big, loud booms. When you do this exercise I just lined out, it'll be this faint little whisper from way over here, and you'll hear it very, very quietly. And when you get to that place, by the way, and it's whispering at you and it's saying, that was really unfair. I cannot believe that happened. That's ridiculous. I'm angry, and you hear in a very quiet voice, you get to sit there and say, I know you're angry. I hear you. I understand that was frustrating. I get you. But that wasn't my experience. I got to witness it. I got to be part of it, but it was not my experience. And so, yes, I'm sad. Yes, I feel those things, but I am not my emotions. I'm not my feelings. I was there to witness this thing. And when you get to that place, it brings you back to that place of controlling yourself. And by the way, allowing yourself to make a choice and a decision for you. This is where some people get guided by their emotions and their feelings. And I've been one of those people a lot in my life, and it's got me into a lot of trouble in a lot of ways. But I can say it separates it out now where you're not your feelings and not your emotions. And that's where you can take back control of yourself in those moments. And that's where it gets you into gratitude. It gets you into appreciation of things. It brings you back to love, because something that Tony Robbins said to me, and I'll wrap up with this because it was really powerful: gratitude and fear cannot coexist. They cannot be in the same room because one trumps the other. And so, if you can move yourself to that place of gratitude, yes, that moment was awful. Losing Corey was tragic. Losing Caden was tragic. It was. But we don't have to live there because we can celebrate them. We can honor their life by what we choose to do and be.
Sorry, Chris, my dogs were going crazy because someone
Oh, that's
went
all
on the
right.
door as you're going through that magical moment of stuff. Oh, that was so frustrating for me. And I don't know how they couldn't see me working through the mirror or the window. I'm just gonna put a pause here for a second, okay?
Mhm.
There's a reason why I named this podcast and put, with Tara Joe and Bailey Boo for a reason, because sometimes there's this barking interruption that happens. But I just wanted to just say it's so beautiful to hear you talk about, the emotion part in all of this and just that acceptance piece. And I think that the more that we do this, Chris, the more we can change people's lives by allowing them to see the gift in embracing that, the emotion. And I just really loved that concept of the observer, as well, like from, for me, one of the gifts that people say I give them is this eagle-eyed view of their life, being able to give them a bird's eye
Mm.
view of perspective. That is the gift I give my clients often. Some, even if just a friend, they'll come to me, I'll say something on audio message, they'll be like, oh, that's life-changing. And I was like, oh, really? Like, it's just the thing I do. And so that observer is very similar to that concept of just how I sometimes look at life. When somebody has a problem, I zoom out. It's just this automatic
Mm.
thing that I do. and be able to see all sides of perspective from some people. And it's really triggering for some people. So this is the other thing I wanted to bring up was if you are early on in grief, we might have talked about, they might have already shut off the podcast, but like we might have talked about something that could be very triggering for
Hmm.
somebody today, just based on being new in the grief, if they've just lost somebody, heightened emotions are happening, they might not want to hear that it's a gift. That those words might really
Hmm.
piss them off, and it's okay if it does. And what I say to
Yep.
that is you will be ready for what Chris and I do to help others when you are ready. You'll
Hmm.
know that it is time for you to accept some form of help through a grief journey, through a coach, through a healer, through a psychologist, whatever realm fits you. You'll know it's time because often we'll get tired of being and living a certain way, right? So numbing the feelings through substances is one way that people can do it. Um, numbing ourselves through binge watching TV. There's so many different ways. There's just so many ways that we can not be dealing with things correctly. And I say that there's no wrong way to grieve, but there does get a point, I think, where we stop living life when we're in the grief so heavy and we don't want the help. When you're wanting the help, when you're wanting life to be a little bit different, when you're ready for that moment, you'll know. You'll know. There'll
Hmm.
be the whispers that come through either through other people or something you're watching on TV or a walk that you take. Your whatever grief that you're going through, even if it was a job loss, you'll know it's time. You'll get to a certain place in your life where it'll change. Something will change for you. And let it be okay. Let yourself experience what you're experiencing right now. Maybe listen to this podcast at another date too, because you'll probably hear something you're ready to hear, right? That's what I've always noticed. I've listened to things multiple times just because you hear what you want to hear in the moment. And if somebody wants to work with you, Chris, do you want to just briefly talk about what it is that you do and how they could find you? Obviously, your
Certainly.
podcast called the Empowered Grief Journey is one of the ways, but how else can they? Yeah.
So, so if you guys are interested in working with me, I am on Facebook a lot. You guys will get all my content on there. I interact with many, many people every day in the grief space, and they're at all different spectrums of grief, by the way. I talk to people that, just lost their father to suicide a week ago. Talk to people that are going through that. I've talked to people that lost a child a year ago, and they're still really, really in that hard throw of grief. I talk to people in an array of different life situations. So if you do want to work with me, by the way, I offer free 1 hour empowerment calls where you can jump on and just talk to me and tell me where you're at. And it's really for you to see what coaching is like with me. I like to give you a free coaching session so you know what this looks like to see if it's right for you. Because I'll be honest with you, I wasn't in a place where I was open to coaching in my life, and I've been there. And you have to figure out what's right for you and whether that person's a good fit or not. So making sure you have a 1 hour call to say where you're at in your grief journey and see if we connect and like each other and work well together is a great place to start. I do offer group coaching as well. And those coaching sessions, by the way, I always tell people are not expensive phone calls. Those things are places for you to have a safe place to be heard, seen, and understood. And in my coaching practice, I've always told people there's no judgment over here. This is you being who you need to be. If you need
Mm,
to, for whatever reason, you're having a really rough day, you need to cuss to get it out. I'm here to listen. No harm, no foul. If you need somebody to help gently guide you and kind of get you where you need to go and take small steps, I'm that guy too. I just try to make sure I can support you as you need to and meet you where you are. So you guys can
yeah.
always reach out to me at empowergriefjourney.com to learn more about that. You guys can find my story there. Tara also mentioned I have a podcast as well, the Empower Grief Journey. I'd love for you guys to jump on my podcast and hear some powerful stories. Tara's is on there too, by the way. But I've got a lot of people that have shared very powerful gifts on this podcast, and I'm just very honored to be working in this space.
Well, and I'll probably put your details in the show notes as well, so somebody can go in there and click on your links in there. And I just really appreciate your time. I think there's so much. Every single conversation you and I have, there's so much that gets brought up that we could, obviously write a book together, which we are. So that's exciting. I'm excited about what's to come from that, and I'll be following Chris's journey because I've just seen so much of what you've done in such a short amount of time in these conversations with people that have gone through their own grief journey. There's so much to learn in that. And we're always evolving in our businesses and what we want in our lives. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what comes from all of this for you, as everything's a new journey sometimes. I love that about um, just the world that we are in right now. And I appreciate your time here, Chris. Would love to have you again sometime. And if you're navigating a grief journey and you want to reach out, feel free to message me or Chris. We'd be happy to share a phone call. And I always say, if I can't help them, I know someone that can, because I know a lot of people. So if I'm not the person for you, there's always somebody that I know we can send you to. So lots of love, everyone. Be kind. Have a great day.